Okay, so yesterday we learned about organic chemistry. And that being said, when you say organic chemistry, we are studying carbon and all the compounds containing carbon. So carbon behaves uniquely compared to other elements, and thus we have a separate branch of chemistry for that alone. Now we have also a lot of organic compounds, since because of the unique characteristic of carbon, like it has the ability to form bonds with other carbons also, and at the same time the bonding can also be multiple bonds, double bond or triple bonds. So that will add up to the many organic compounds that we have that are essential, especially for life. So kadugtong ito ng biochemistry ninyo. So kailangan natin ma-establish, again, kailangan natin ma-establish yung foundation ninyo sa organic chemistry before kayo magbabiochem. Now, in organic chemistry, the identification of the compounds will be dependent to the functional group that is present in the structure mismo. So yesterday, we talked about alkanes, alkenes, alkynes, diene, and alcohols. So I hope you have familiarized yourselves sa kanilang characteristic, ano yung mga atoms na present sa kanila, and anong type of bonds ang present also. At the same time, the ending of their names. Like when you say alkane, A lahat yung ending ng kanilang name. And then in for alkenes, ain for alkynes, and then syempre diene for the diene mismo, and the alcohols will end with all. And now, the sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, the sixth functional group that we have for our organic compounds are the ethers. So, ang ethers naman, class, is ang tandaan natin is meron tayong oxygen at the center. And both ends will be an R group. When you say R group, that will be any functional group. Again, any functional group tayo when it comes to ether. So dito sa R1, it can be an alkane, an alkyne, or even an alcohol. And then the R2, the same thing. It can also be an alkane or even an amide or a ketone, as long as the oxygen is found at the center. So in their names, you will see the oxy that is being placed at the center also, since oxygen is found at the center. So we have here an example, ethoxyethane, which means the R1 is an ethane group, and then oxygen at the center, and the R2 is another ethane group. This is the IUPAC name, but the common name for this is diethyl ether. So this is one compound. The other one is the systematic or the IUPAC name, and then the other one is the common name. But let's just be familiar first what ethers are. Again, we have oxygen at the center. So we have the general formula. Let me write sa screen. If alcohol is ROH, then ethers are ROR. This will be the general formula. Do not forget, R is any functional group. And then we have the aldehydes. This time, our general formula is RCHO. So you will have R as any functional group, and then automatic you'll have another carbon bonded to the oxygen. Double bond tayo here, double bond sa oxygen, and then you have the H, but we call aldehyde as RCHO. Now, if aldehyde siya, the ending of the name will be al. So, instead sa alcohol methanol, sa aldehyde, we call it methanal. Methanal, butanal, hexanal, or heptanal. This will be the IUPAC or systematic name. Yung mga na-mention natin yesterday na acetaldehyde and formaldehyde, they are also aldehydes, but those are the common names of the compound. Common names yon. Kapag ka systematic name, the ending will be al. And then we have the ketones. Our general formula for ketones is R-core. R meron tayong parang parehas siya ni ether na that both ends will have the R group. And then at the center, ang kaibahan lang nila, instead of the oxygen, you'll have at the center C double bond O. So if you see this formula class, you should know that the functional group is ketone. So ang name naman nila will end with "-one", like the propanone, butanone. Actually, propanone is commonly called as acetone. So again, acetone is a common name, while propanone is the systematic or the IUPAC name. The IUPAC name is the internationally accepted name of our organic compounds. How we call it systematic or IUPAC name. This is IUPAC name. Okay, and then we have the acid. So just like our inorganic compounds na meron tayong acids, meron din tayong acids for organic compounds. We call them carboxylic acids, and we can identify them in their structure because they contain this one, the COOH. So the COOH can be bonded to any functional group, any other functional group. We have RCOOH. Ang ending naman ng kanilang name is oic acid, like ethanoic acid, which is commonly called as the acetic acid found in our vinegar. Again, we call it acetic acid. So we also have butanoic acid. That's how you know that it is a carboxylic acid. And then we have esters. Esters are actually derivative of carboxylic acids. Their structure is from the carboxylic acid, but this time this becomes RCOOR. So instead of the hydrogen on the last portion, it will be replaced by any functional group, but you still have the C double bond O and another oxygen there. We call these esters, and in their name we have the ending O-weight, like ethyl ethanoate. The ending is O-weight. This is the IUPAC name. The common name is the ethyl acetate. Actually, yung ginagamit natin sa yung nasa efficacent and yung sa mga liniment natin, di ba ang nakalagay dyan, methyl salicylate. That is actually an ester. Again, that is an ester, pero the one used in the label is the common name. Kaya methyl salicylate, hindi natin nakikita yung ending na O-weight. Okay? And then another derivative of our carboxylic acid is called the amide. For the amide naman, you have here RCO and R. So the N can have hydrogen actually. So meron kang hydrogen dyan, pero pwede na ding RCO and R. You have functional groups, any functional groups at the terminal, while you have at the center C double bond O and a nitrogen group. Again, we call this an amide. This structure is still derived from carboxylic acid. So sa name naman nila, there will be an ending na amide, like N-methyl ethanamide. So pag may nakita kayong amide na ending, the functional group is amide, and you will see this structure in the formula. And then we have amines also. This is different from the amides, ha? The amines class is wala yung C double bond O at the center. Diretso ka na R as any functional group, and then diretso ka na sa NH2. Diretso ka na sa nitrogen. And then the nitrogen is bonded to hydrogen. So kaya meron pa tayong H2 here. So instead naman of amide sa ending, ito naman amine, like ethanamine. That's a different thing. That's a different substance from the amides. Yung nawala dito is the C double bond O. Diretso ka na kay nitrogen. And then the nitriles, ang nitriles naman is RCN. R, any functional group, and then you have the carbon bonded, triple bonded to nitrogen. Ang ending naman is the nitrile pa rin, like ethane nitrile. And lastly, we have the thiols. The thiols naman, our general formula is RSH. So you have their sulfur and hydrogen bonded to any functional group. Their name will end with thiol. So we have the example ethane, thiol. Questions so far about our functional groups. This one is just an overview. This is not yet the whole discussion kasi we have to study them one by one. Each of them, kailangan yung malaman and ma-understand how are we going to make the structure and how are we going to name them also. Kailangan natin sila isa-isahin. So this is just an overview. I just need you to know the general formula of each functional group for our organic compounds. So ito naman, this is actually the same. You have there the functional group still, the compound, the alkane, mag-e-end siya sa ane. And then we have a specific example here, CH3, CH3. You have two carbons singly bonded with each other, kaya mag-e-end siya sa ane. So since dalawang carbon yan, we call it ethane. And then we have C, double bond C, two carbons pa rin. So mag-start siya sa F, pero this time mag-end siya sa in. So ethene. This will be the example, CH2, double bond CH2. Kapag walang bond sa gitna, class, automatic single bond yan ha. Magkakaroon yan ng bond kapag pinakita talaga like this one, double bond and triple bond. Pag walang nakalagay, automatic single bond. So we have here for the alkyne, so CH double bond, triple bond CH. We call this ethyne for our IUPAC name, but the common name is acetylene. And by the way, this functional group was not included in the previous slide. We have the so-called haloalkane, wherein one hydrogen of supposedly the alkane is substituted by a halogen. So the halogen is the elements belonging to group 7A in the periodic table, starting from fluorine and then chlorine, bromine, and iodine. So again, instead of, diba, we have here 4 valence electrons of carbon, and if we are talking about hydrocarbons, all of this will be bonded to hydrogen. But if ever one or more hydrogen is replaced by a halogen, we call it haloalkane. So example of this is this one. Instead na CH4 siya, naging CH3 na lang siya kasi yung isang hydrogen is substituted with a chlorine. So ang tawag naman dito is chloromethane. Okay, chloromethane. And then we have the ROH here, the alcohol. Mag-e-end sa ol yung kanyang pangalan. This is also another substituted hydrocarbon wherein one of the hydrogen, which is supposedly CH4, one of the hydrogen is substituted with an OH. So since there is a presence of the hydroxyl group, this is now an alcohol. This is not an alkane na. So we call this methanol. Instead of methane, methanol na siya. And that is true for amine also. We can also substitute one hydrogen from the alkane. We will substitute it with NH2. So this one is the R group here. This is an alkane. And then NH2, amine na siya. Ethylamine, this will be the systematic or IUPAC name. And the aminoethane will be the common name. Overview lang yan ha. Ayan yung discussion talaga ng bawat functional groups. The ether naman, we have here, sabi ko sa inyo, how do you know, how do you identify ether? If you have an oxygen at the center. And both ends will have any functional group. So just like this one, CH3, that's an alkane. And then oxygen at the center, and then another CH3 on the right side. So we have here dimethyl ether. This one is a common name, not an IUPAC name. Si aldehyde naman, how do you identify them? Diba sabi ko kanina, R-CHO. But let's give a specific example. R, the CH3 will be the R. And then this is the CHO, C double bond, O, and then H. Aldehyde yan siya. That's how you know that the functional group is aldehyde. So in this case, it's ethanol since you have 2 carbons. Ethanol siya, common name is acetaldehyde. Now, for the ketone, our general formula is R core, RC double bond O, R. Let's have a specific example. You have here CH3 as the R, and then this is the C, O, and then the CH3 here will also be the R. So any functional group, but nevertheless, since you have C double bond O at the center, this is called a ketone. To be exact, this is called the propanone, but commonly tinatawag natin siyang acetone. Okay? And then, how do you know the carboxylic acid? If there is the presence of COOH. So let's have here, let's identify R. CH3 is the R. So COOH, automatic carboxylic acid siya. Okay, that is the acetic acid or the ethanoic acid. Now for the ester, you can identify ester if you can see this COOR. So let's look at the example. This one is the R here, COO, and then the CH3 is also an R, any functional group. We call this methyl ethanoate or the methyl acetate. Okay. And then for the amide, how will you know? You should have the presence of C double bond O and then your nitrogen. Pwede na nga walang R dyan, class, as long as may C double bond O ka at the center before the nitrogen. This will automatically be an amide. So just like this one, R, C double bond O, and then NH2. This is called ethanamide, or commonly we call this acetamide. Identification muna tayo ng different functional groups before natin sila isa-isahin. So questions so far. In the quizzes or the exam, I might give you a structure or a chemical formula just like this one or this one here, the CH3OCH3, and you will be identifying what functional group is that. Yan din yung magiging quiz or exam natin. Questions? Wala. Kaya, laban, Japan. Sa oras na. Sige na kong istorya niya. Time na di ay maniud to. Okay. So wala question. Let's move on. Structure and physical properties. Class for organic chemistry, we have 4 types of formula. Remember, in inorganic chemistry, we only have the molecular formula and the empirical formula. The molecular formula, remember, will give us the number of atoms for each element present in the compound, while the empirical formula is the simplified formula, yung nire-reduce natin. Pero pagdating sa organic chemistry, meron tayong 4. Kaya mas complicated talaga si OrgChem kaysa sa kay GenChem. The inorg-chem. Okay? So we have the first one here. We still have the molecular formula. And kagaya ng molecular formula natin sa inorg, ganun pa rin ang meaning ni molecular formula sa OrgChem. Okay, tama yan siya, Rosemary. The condensed and the skeletal formula are the other types of formula for the OrgChem. The molecular formula, again, will show us the exact number of atoms of each elements present in our organic compound. But this will not show us the bonding. It will just summarize how many atoms are present for each element. So for example, butane. When we write the molecular formula of butane, we will just summarize na meron siyang 4 na carbon, so C4, and meron siyang 10 hydrogen. So all in all, butane's molecular formula is C4H10. That's how we make the molecular formula. Let's summarize. Let's add all the atoms for each element. So without the bonding, kung saan na nakaband yung 4 na carbon na yan and ilang hydrogen yung nakaband sa bawat carbon, hindi yan siya sinoshow pagdating sa molecular formula. isa-summarize lang talaga siya sa number of atoms for each element. And that is also true for octane. You have here C8H18. Pag nakakita kayo class na ganito, we call it molecular formula. Now let's have the number 2, the structural formula. Look at the examples on the screen. This is how we make the structural formulas. For the structural formula, we really write the bonding between the atoms of each element. So the location of the chemical bonds are written, and the location of these atoms are also being represented or written. Now the bondings are represented by a line, a short line. So just like sa ethane class, supposedly, wala pala siya sa chemical, sa molecular formula, no? Ethane class is C2H6 when it comes to its molecular formula. But for the structural formula, you will really show the bonding. That carbon is bonded to another carbon, and that, remember, 4 na bonds ang pwedeng gawin for carbon kasi meron siyang 4 na valence electron. So since one of the bonding or one of the electron has been taken due to the carbon-to-carbon bond, the rest will be for the hydrogen. So kaya, ganito yung structural formula ng ating ethane. Okay? So the remaining remaining electrons of carbon will be now for the hydrogen. Pag gumawa kayo ng structural formula, unahin niyo muna yung mga carbon-to-carbon bonding. So just like propane, propane class is C3H8. Meaning pag, ito yung molecular formula, pag inask ko kayo, make the structural formula of propane, you start with the carbon-to-carbon bonds. So lahat sila are connected, and that the hydrogen will be distributed to the remaining bonds. So remember, 4, no? For this carbon here, ang naiwan niya na bond ay 3. Okay? 3 para 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So yung 3 na yan, lalagyan mo lang ng hydrogen. But for the carbon at the center, since 2 bonds na ang nakuha, meaning 2 na lang ang natira for hydrogen. For the last one, parehas siya nung sa left side, may 3 bonds siya na natira. Yan yung lalagyan mo ng hydrogen. So if you count, you have, yes, 3 carbons, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hydrogen. So tama na, nagtugma na ang ating molecular formula and the structural formula. Okay? So do not forget how the structural formula will really show us the location of the bonds between these atoms sa ating compound. Now, if you have double bonds, you really have to show 2 lines. Okay? So like C double bond C. And then, example, ethene, how we are making the ethene. 2 carbon and then in, which means double bond sila. Now, paano yung H niya? I-count nyo lang class, meron ng 2 here, meaning ang natira ay 2 na lang din. So, 2 hydrogen lang ang pwede mong ilagay. That is also true for the carbon here at the right, since 2 bonding na yung nakuha because of the double bond, 2 hydrogen na lang din ang natitira. Pag gumagawa kayo class ng structural formula, since we are talking about organic compounds, we will be dealing with carbon. Always see to it na hanggang 4 lang talaga ang kayang pwedeng mag-bond kay carbon. So kung nakuha na ng double bond, ilan na lang natira? 2. So how much more for the alkynes na 3? If you have triple bonds here, carbon to carbon bond, nakuha na yung 3. For both carbon, isang bond na lang yung natira, and that is for the hydrogen. Okay, nay nanawag. Dili ta mo tubag kay mo klase sa ta. Okay, questions about the structural formula? Wala.
Ma'am.
Okay, so let us continue. That's the second one, ha. Now this one was being mentioned by, who was that again? Rosemary, the condensed formula. Again, this one is called the condensed formula. Now, what about the condensed formula? This will show us all the atoms in a molecule and place them in sequential order that indicates which atoms are bonded to which. Sa structural formula, nakaspread talaga, no, papakita talaga natin yung bondings between the atoms. But sa number 3, since it is called condensed formula, i-condense natin sila. Hindi din ito kagaya actually ng molecular formula. Okay. So, for the methane kasi is CH4. So, kung isusulat natin yung structural formula niya, ganito siya. Ipapakita natin lahat ng bondings for the carbon and the hydrogen. This is the, what we call this, structural formula. Kung molecular formula naman, you have one carbon. By the way, we don't need to write one. If isang carbon lang yan siya, don't need to write one as subscript, ha? So C, diretso na yan siya, and then 4 na hydrogen. This is the molecular formula. For the condensed formula of methane, parehas lang siya with the molecular formula. Pero pagdating sa ethane class, let's differentiate the 3 types of formula. For ethane kasi, you have here this one, dalawang carbon. And yung mga natitirang bonds will be for the hydrogen. So this will be the structural formula of ethane. For the molecular formula, di ba? Molecular formula, you will just have the element. So meron kang carbon. And ilang atom siya? 2. And then for the hydrogen, ilan yan? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This will be the molecular formula of our ethane. Pero pagdating sa condensed formula class, ganito. I-group natin together yung isang carbon and lahat ng hydrogen na nakapalibot sa kanya. So, let me change the color of my pen first. I-group natin. This one is one group here. One carbon is one group. And then another carbon is another group na naman. Okay? Parang isa-summarize natin sila but not really that summarized na parehas talaga sa molecular formula. So we have here, on the first group, you have 1 carbon and 3 hydrogen. So they are one group. We will write them as CH3. And then lalagyan natin ng bond. Actually, yung iba hindi na nilalagyan ng bond. Diretso sila CH3. Tapos the next group will also be CH3. So ipagtatabi lang nila. So parehas pa rin yan, ha. Either you write a bond between one group and another group or pwede mo na silang ipagtabi kung single bond lang naman talaga sila. Pwede na hindi ipakita ang bond. This is still called a condensed formula. Okay? Kagaya din ng propane, pwede mo siyang isulat na CH3, CH2, CH3. Condensed formula pa rin ang tawag dyan. Pwede siyang ipagtabi kapag ka-single bond. Pero pag double bond class, ipakita mo talaga yung double bond in between. Kahit na condensed formula siya. Like CH2, double bond CH2, and then kung single bond na lang yung natira, pwede mo siyang itabi na CH3. Basta ipakita mo yung double bond. This is not propane, ha? This is not propane. This is propene. Propene. Pakita ko lang yung double bond. Questions about the condensed formula? Before time mag-end? Wala. Ang last class, tapusin ko na lang ito kasi ito na yung last natin na formula. It's the line formula, or we call this the skeletal formula. This is actually the simplest representation of our molecule na line lang talaga yung gagamitin natin. And in the line formula, we assume na lahat ng intersection dyan and lahat ng ending dyan merong carbon. Okay? So just like this one, itong example natin, we have here at the ending, ina-assume natin na may carbon siya. And then, sa intersection between this line and this line here, meron din siyang carbon. That is also true for this intersection and the ending here. Meron silang lahat carbon. And sa line formula, we also assume na yung carbons dyan merong kasamang hydrogen. Pero hindi na siya pinapakita. Diretso na siya line, like this one. Pwede siya ganyan. Okay? So lahat ng mga ends dyan and intersections may carbon and kasama nila yung corresponding number of hydrogen. Pero kung meron siyang double bond, ganun pa rin. Kung tingnan nyo sa screen, lagyan mo lang siya ng ganito. Okay. So this one means meron siyang double bond. Okay? Yan yung ginagawa for the skeletal formula. And then again, this one is our simplest representation. So pag pinagawa kayo class, this is the ending of our discussion. Example, ethane, 'di ba? Ang kanyang molecular formula is meron siyang dalawang carbon and 6 na hydrogen. Pero yung structural formula niya, kailangan mo talagang isulat lahat with all the bondings. So if i-fill in mo yung remaining bonds with the hydrogen. And then yung kanyang condensed formula, group natin sila together. So you have there the CH3. And then this carbon here will be CH3 also. Pero pag ang pinasulat sa inyo ay ang kanyang line formula, this is 1 carbon here. Again, this is 1 carbon here sa ending, and then another carbon on the ending. So yan lang talaga ang line formula ni ethane. Okay? Yan lang talaga ang line formula niya. Kasi dalawang carbon na yan. One end will have the carbon and then the other end will also have a carbon. So dalawang carbon lang talaga si ethane. Pwede din naman siyang ganito. Pwede din siyang ganito as long as one line lang talaga. And since walang double bond si ethane, wala ka ding ilalagay na kagaya nito class. So that's how you make the 4 types of formula for organic chemistry. When I do chemical formula, I always use the condensed formula. So baka magtaka kayo, when we proceed with our discussion, especially about alkane, most of the time I'm using the condensed formula. Like gagawa ako CH3, CH2, CH2, CH3. Ganito ko siya isulat. That will be easier for us to study the naming and the chemical formula if we use the condensed formula. Mahirap kasi gumamit ng molecular formula sa sa organic chem kasi hindi natin nakikita yung bonding. Hindi din natin alam kung may double bond ba siya or may triple bond. And medyo time consuming and effort, masyadong may effort ang paggawa ng SF ng structural formula, and minsan nakakalito si skeletal formula, kaya mas ginagamit talaga si condensed formula. Okay? Questions before ta maniud to? Wala na? Sure. Yes, Fatima?
Ay, regarding po to doon sa ma'am ba yung sa special quiz po. What time po mag-take, ma'am?
What time mag-quiz? 2 o'clock.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Okay, that is both for lecture and lab ha. Pero 1:30 mag-meet tayo group 1 ha.